Welcome back, everyone. Today's explainer is on a mission to completely decode the biomechanics of forearm growth. Now, did you know that in the medical world, your grip strength is actually one of the strongest predictors of your overall longevity? Pretty crazy, right? But hey, today we're zoning in on the aesthetics and the anatomy. So if you've ever felt like, you're putting in all this grueling work at the gym, but your arms still aren't commanding that presence you want, well, you are in exactly the right place. We are going to break down the exact step-by-step science and anatomy you need to build massive, powerful forearms. And we'll be looking at some truly fascinating source material that kind of flips conventional wisdom totally on its head.
So let's tackle the biggest elephant in the room right off the bat. I hear this all the time. I've got naturally thin wrists, so no matter how hard I train, my arms are just always going to look small. It's a huge source of insecurity for a lot of guys. But what's really wild about the science we're digging into today is that this perceived genetic flaw, it might actually be your greatest hidden advantage. I'm serious. Having a thin wrist is absolutely not a life sentence to small arms. Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The small wrist advantage, 2. The forearm muscle anatomy, 3. Growing the brachioradialis, 4. Flexors, extensors, and grip, and 5. Your 15-minute workout split. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the small wrist advantage. So biologically speaking, your wrist is basically just bone and connective tissue. Because there's barely any muscle mass down there, you literally cannot organically grow your wrist circumference through training. It just doesn't happen. However, just an inch away, your forearm is completely packed with these dense, highly hypertrophic muscle groups. Building those muscles right next to a really narrow joint, it creates this massive visual taper, a really stark structural contrast. Think about it. A guy with massive, God-given thick wrists has to pack on a staggering amount of muscle to make his arms look big. But your small wrists mean you need significantly less overall muscle mass to create that huge, eye-popping visual contrast. It's an illusion, and it works perfectly. Now, you might be wondering why we're dedicating a whole explainer just to this one specific area. Well, you can build an incredible chest, you can have massive shoulders and a totally shredded back, but for most of the year, all of that hard work is just hiding under a t-shirt, right? Your forearms are basically this single aesthetic muscle group that stays visible year-round. The source material points out that even if you're carrying around 20 to 25% body fat, properly trained forearms are still going to pop. They'll show vascularity, and they'll give you that undeniable aesthetic, powerful look.
Moving on to section 2, the forearm muscle anatomy. Okay, so forearm training isn't just about looking good in a rolled-up shirt. It is an absolute biomechanical necessity. If you ever find yourself on back day and, say, your grip gives out way before your lats actually do, or if you literally can't push your biceps to true failure, well, your forearms are the weak link, plain and simple. Even that nagging elbow pain you might get during bench presses, that can be a glaring sign of poor forearm structural support. If your forearms are weak, you just cannot push your bigger muscle groups to the failure point that's absolutely necessary for real growth.
Let's dive into section 3, growing the brachioradialis.
All right, say hello to the absolute kin of the forearm, the brachioradialis. This is that super thick, dense muscle located right at the top of your forearm, kind of bridging near the elbow. The data shows this single muscle is responsible for a staggering 70 to 80% of your forearm's total aesthetic volume. Let that sink in. Biomechanically, if this specific muscle lacks density, that is exactly when the surrounding elbow tendons start taking the brunt of the load during those heavy presses, and that's what causes pain. So if you want size and structural integrity, this right here is your primary target. So how do we target it? Well, we look at 2 distinct grips. A neutral grip, think of a classic hammer curl, is fantastic for providing this steady overall tension. But shifting to a pronated or an overhand grip is literally the ultimate biomechanical hack. Doing reverse curls with a pronated grip completely forces the brachioradialis to isolate and take over all the load. The science dictates that if you're short on time, you should absolutely prioritize the pronated grip to just force this specific muscle to grow.
Next up, section 4, flexors, extensors, and grip. Okay, so while the brachioradialis gives you all that bulk, your flexors and extensors are the guys that give you that intricate, dense, and highly vascular look. The flexors live on the underside of your forearm, and the extensors are right there on the top. Their entire biological job, their sole purpose, is simply to bend and extend your wrist. Now, the source data overwhelmingly points to one universally superior tool for blasting these muscles, and that's the wrist roller.
But listen up, because biomechanical form is absolutely everything here. You should never, ever hold the roller straight out in front of you. That just recruits the anterior deltoids and totally steals the tension away from your arms. Instead, keep it tucked right below your chest with slightly bent elbows. Rolling the weight up optimally isolates those extensors, and rolling it down with strict control totally blasts the flexors.
And hey, what if you don't have a dedicated wrist roller at your gym? Honestly, the biomechanics don't care about fancy equipment one bit. You can easily build a highly effective DIY version right at home, using just a heavy stick, some rope, and a brick. Yeah, it might look a little bit like a medieval torture device, but trust me, it functions exactly the same way.
Finally, we cannot ignore the underlying engine room of the hand. We're talking about the flexor digitorum and the extensor carpi. These are the smaller, much deeper muscles that are entirely responsible for your raw grip strength. If you want a handshake that actually commands respect and real physical presence, these are the exact muscles you must engage. Ignoring them? Well, it just means you're missing out on vital functional power.
Training these deep muscles requires forcing some serious muscular adaptation, and you basically have two primary paths here. The classic hand gripper provides active concentric resistance. It's awesome because it's something you can keep at your desk, toss in your car, or even use while you're just kicking back watching TV. Alternatively, the dead hang requires literally zero equipment. You just grab a bar and let gravity apply a brutal isometric load until you hit absolute muscular failure. Both of these methods are phenomenal for forcing immense adaptation in those deep grip muscles.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, your 15-minute workout split. All right, here is your actionable, science-backed 15-minute split that you can tag right onto the end of your regular workouts. Notice the biomechanical balance we've set up here. Day 1 hits the brachioradialis with hammer curls to get that volume in, while day 2 intelligently swaps over to reverse curls to completely maximize targeted isolation. Both days feature wrist curls for the flexors, and then you just finish it all off with raw grip strength work until failure. Now, because forearms are relatively small, dense muscles that pack a super high concentration of slow twitch fibers, they recover incredibly fast, really fast. So if you're a beginner, you can easily run this twice a week. As your central nervous system adapts over time, intermediate lifters can bump that up to 3 or 4 times a week. And for the advanced lifters out there, you can actually run a condensed 10-minute version of this every single day. But remember, this one rule: volume only triggers hypertrophy if your range of motion remains absolutely flawless. Ultimately, what all this science shows us is that consistency and strict form are really all you need to totally flip the script. You aren't just building muscle here. You are engineering a structural illusion that turns a perceived genetic flaw into your absolute most commanding visible asset. So you now have the exact anatomical roadmap and the specific workout split to actually make it happen. The science is completely clear, the methods are proven, and honestly, finding that 15 minutes a day is entirely up to you. So I'll leave you with this. Are you ready to let anatomy build your most visible muscle, or are you just going to keep letting your grip fail on back day? The choice is entirely yours. Get out there, put in the work, and let's see those forearms grow.